All right, everyone, we start the day with a very funny story. Apparently, John McCain, with his friends and relatives, it looks like he's, getting towards the end there, I suppose. Sort of having the last hurrah, the last drunken hangout where they watch war footage of little children being blown apart. So I imagine that's what he and Dick Cheney get up to on a daily basis. Apparently, he doesn't want Trump to come to his funeral. He wants Pence to come instead. So basically, John McCain is still bitter. And, while calling Donald Trump childish or immature, he doesn't know what he's doing, John McCain says this sort of bullshit. Okay, yeah, that's really, really mature, John. Meanwhile, in other news, Trump's approval is now edging up towards that sweet spot that I talked about little over a week ago, which is 45%. It's perilously close to the very, very dangerous zone for the Democrats. So John McCain may have chosen the perfect time to alienate himself from someone who's really going to rise up, I think, further, totally supplant the neocon arm of the GOP. It's an era of good feelings sort of feeling right now, I think, for a lot of those who stuck it out with Trump and realized the Mueller probe was a sham and that it's just part of his persona. Part of his persona, the way he governs, is the way he runs a boardroom. He wants to be chaotic and unpredictable. That doesn't mean he's less effective. It's done wonders for Asian politics. I think that's why John McCain doesn't want him at his funeral. I think John McCain has several problems with Trump. Number one, John McCain is a warmonger. He likes war, he likes killing, he likes violence and fanaticism. His friends are literally Islamic jihadists in many cases. He hangs out with these people. He didn't learn his lesson from being in a prison camp, I guess, when he was shot down over Vietnam. He didn't learn his fucking lesson. Now he wants other young men to have to get tortured because he's bitter. And that's the fundamental central part of his character I think we need to focus on. John McCain is a bitter and vile, despicable human being. He never should have been applauded and held up on a pedestal by the Republicans. I can remember he's running against Obama. Oh, but he's a war hero. Obama never went to war. Yeah, he was in war. And he didn't learn his fucking lesson. If a person has gone off to war and been tortured and they're still a war hawk, they're dumb. They're despicable. They want others to have to go through what they go through. And by the way, I don't pull any punches. It's like when John McCain was diagnosed with cancer. And I said, now he's got brain cancer. Maybe he'll actually spawn some intelligence. The tumor will have an IQ higher than the rest of him. People are like, oh, don't say that. Come on, the man is dying. He's old. He's a has-been, basically. He's old and dying, and you should have a little bit of respect. He's a warrior. No, he's not a war hero. He got tortured for a while. What else did he do? What, did he manage to blow up some Viet Cong compound that I'm not seeing? Did he go on was it a secret mission? He managed to deliver serum to a bunch of starving little orphans? No, he didn't. He just fucking was imprisoned in Vietnam. So, what, that makes his politics better? That makes his war hawking more acceptable? That's one of the main reasons I think he doesn't like Trump. Trump appears to genuinely be averse to the world police thing. I genuinely think that he's still talking about wanting to withdraw early from Syria. I hope he does quicker rather than more slowly. On Korea, he's done what a President McCain would never do. President McCain would have thought about targeted strikes in a more serious fashion. He wouldn't have just talked about it on Twitter and then basically forgotten about it because it's part of his strategy. Which, by the way, that's what it appears to be. Trump was basically going unhinged on Twitter rants to scare North Korea's dictatorship. It actually worked. John McCain, I think, also doesn't like Trump because Trump won. John McCain lost. He wanted to be president of the United States. Now he has to be still Senator McCain, who lost. He didn't end up, he gets nominated. He makes a shitty VP choice. I'm not exactly sure even still why he chose Sarah Palin. It kind of backfired. I think with a better Veep slot, he may have done more well against Obama. I think Obama wouldn't have steamrolled him out of existence if he had chosen someone who was sane as a running mate, okay? He looks at Trump and he sees Trump says weird shit, he does weird shit, and yet he still wins. Meanwhile, I play nice. I'm part of the GOP establishment. At the time, McCain was literally a Bushite normie, and he still loses. He feels so schlonged. He feels like Hillary Clinton feels. That's the reason. So John McCain's going to pull a Hillary Clinton, only maybe with a little more finesse. He won't let the issue go. Here we are more than a year on, and he's still whining about not liking Trump. What has Trump done lately to piss John McCain off? The only thing I can think of is solving the Korean conflict without using a bunch of explosives. That's really the only thing I can think of. John McCain is a desperately bitter old man, and he's going to keep being bitter, and he's going to die, and I'm sure all of the other warmongers will show up and talk about what a wonderful guy he was. At the end, at the 11th hour, even Trump will come out and say, oh, my condolences to his family. Basically, fuck you, I'm not going to your funeral. By the way, why would Trump want to go? What did John McCain do for him except for oppose him and talk about how he might be nuts? And talk about, it might be a problem if he tries to fire Mueller or something. Like he was ever going to do that anyway. Oh, he might fire Rosenstein. He disrespected the FBI. The same FBI that does provably contain, according to what Congress is telling us, agents that were blatantly biased against Trump. The same intel community that appears to have had connections with the Steele dossier and Fusion GPS through the wife of the person running the show over there anyway. Some CIA agent. A lot of shoddy, shifty shit is going on. Trump managed to bamboozle the establishment, and John McCain's mad because he wishes he had thought of it. He wishes that he could have become the president of the United States, only he would have started a few more wars. It would have been Bush 2.0. Not that Obama in many ways wasn't, but as far as land invasion, a little bit less. A few less body bags coming back here, but just as many body bags in the deserts, with other people's citizens dying, which, I wasn't a fan of, but, fewer coming back here. It was less visible. It was more of a covert war. Trump, by the way, continuing this. I wish he would ease up even further on it. I'm more of an isolationist, yes. Trump, I don't believe so, but he's not a proxy war maniac. John McCain is. John McCain is just a jingoist. He's like, I'm going to throw more money to the military because I'm going to start 3 or 4 conflicts. And they're going to be limitless, too. It's like we're in a world war right now where we conduct combat operations literally anywhere we happen to fucking want to. Nobody even thinks of it as a war for some reason. People have gone nuts. John McCain, though, has been nuts for years. He's always been that. Like, remember when he was on the campaign trail, 2008. One of the leading scandals of the day was when he started singing Bomb, Bomb, Bomb Iran. You remember that little ditty and how well that served him? Yeah, that wasn't a good idea, and yet he'd rather be bitter at Donald Trump. So Donald Trump, he hasn't started World War III, didn't start a depression. All he did was tell McCain to fuck off because he kept trying to start wars. He said it on Twitter. And Lindsey Graham, of course, who Lindsey Graham is not like John McCain. In all honesty, one thing you can say about McCain is he has fortitude. He's able to persevere a little bit more and stick to his opinions. Now, those opinions are usually shitty, but he'll stick to them. Lindsey Graham just waffles around. He's like a limp noodle, in the most literal sense. I think that we may speculate. He should be joining the log cabin Republicans, but come on. Lindsey Graham very quickly realized Trump wasn't going to get impeached, wasn't going to start a depression and get kicked out of office, and he decided to play nice with him. John McCain, though, he just sits there. He doesn't even clap when Trump's giving the State of the Union. He just sits there and makes an angry face. He's like, oh man, I wish I was up on that podium talking about how we needed to invade another country. That's his problem. So he wants Pence at his funeral. Also, Pence is more of an evangelocon too. I can imagine he would get along more with the Pence. Pence is the insurance that Trump has anyway against getting impeached because Pence wouldn't be capable of leading the country. Take one look at the man's caricature. He'd be very good leading a megachurch congregation, not so much leading an army. That's about all. Peace out. All right, everyone, there's someone who's actually running for office right now that, a decade ago I actually kind of liked the way which they did business, but they've changed now and they've become, I think, a total sellout, and that's Dennis Kucinich. He's currently running against Cordray over in Ohio in the Democratic primary to try to become the next governor of Ohio, and there's a less than 50-50 chance, it seems, based on relatively sporadic and thus not entirely reliable polling. It appears to show that Kucinich has about a 10-point deficit versus his opponent, and their voting's, I think, in the next few days, if I remember correctly. So it doesn't look like he's likely to be nominated. But there are some reasons to worry that maybe he pulls it out of his ass. And so if you're in Ohio and you plan to vote in the Democratic primary, officially I endorse his opponent for that position. Because Dennis Kucinich is someone, back in the era when Bush had, fucked up the country, really, he had been a fuck up. Kucinich was one of the voices. It's like, fairly early on, the war's dragging on, it seems messy and pointless. The government is getting kind of scary with the surveillance and stuff, and that was mainly his focus. He was almost like a left libertarian at the time. And the drug war needs to end, which is one thing I still support him on, and he goes further than most Democrats on that, so give him, again, credit where credit's due on that one issue. He's like, I'll legalize pot if I become the governor of Ohio. That's a great idea. Of course, Ohio tried to do that and tried to corporatize it because, it's Ohio. Here's the thing. Dennis Kucinich's new platform, though, has two major platforms, it seems. If you look at his social media accounts, there are two things he fixates on. One is, hey, welfare and more taxes to pay for more programs, which is like standard neoliberal tripe. It's to buy votes, basically. It would be illegal to give someone $100 to vote for you, but it's perfectly legal to proclaim that you want to steal other people's money and give it to them if they vote for you. I find that a little bit odd. We need a constitutional amendment to cap the tax rate in this country and in a state level and stuff too, and reduce the cost of regulations. It'd be a wonderful thing. But he's trying to cast himself as the progressive Donald Trump. That's not really a progressive platform. That's just standard liberalism. And then he goes off into gun la land, and he's like, oh, well, we need to ban those assault weapons. It's terrible stuff. Again, so you want to pander based on a wedge issue, one that's slowly losing steam, thankfully, and it always does. Because people are realizing you are wrong. You're fixated on a tiny minority of all shootings and all violent crimes in the United States, a declining over time total that spiked during a period when we had substantially more gun control than we have now. So Dennis Kucinich does not know what he's talking about. No progressive or liberal that I've encountered on this issue knows what they're talking about. And the progressive line is ban assault weapons. The neoliberal, limp noodle, the Lindsey Graham style line, is basically universal background checks. The one thing that they can probably get away with making constitutional, properly put into place. Okay, wonderful. So your platform is guns are bad and we need more taxes. Why don't you just fucking be honest with people? Your platform used to be government power is too substantial. Spying is a problem, war is a problem, but the Iraq war is basically has dwindled off. It's no longer really an active conflict for the most part. Now it takes the form of targeted strikes, hopefully just on ISIS targets. Not 100% sure I believe the Pentagon when it claims this, but that's basically what it has turned into. It's no longer, hey, we've got a 500,000 people running around in the desert. That's the era Kucinich did well in, because that was the big ticket item of the day. Unfortunately, the big ticket item right now is Trump is scary and says non-PC things, and where there are too many guns. That's basically what the Democratic Party platform is. By the way, the Democrats should hope Kucinich loses, because otherwise he's going to rebrand the party. He is capable of doing that. I mean, he's on the older side as opposed to the last time he ran for a substantial office. He was trying to become the president. I think he came in 4th in the Democratic primaries there. It was basically an Obama and Clinton matchup, and I can't remember. It was, John Edwards, the dude who cheated on his cancer-stricken wife while pretending to be the religious Democrat. Yeah, have you ever seen this? You can call it the religious Democrats. It's a Democrat who nods and winks at you and alludes to loving Jesus and family values. Really it's an afterthought to them, but they give you a wink and a nudge in order to get the religious Democrat vote. Religious Democrats, somebody who will get you to vote for them by talking about Jesus once. It's a really maverick style thing to do within the Democratic Party these days, it seems. Dennis Kucinich, though, is not the Dennis Kucinich that I liked, a decade ago. The Dennis Kucinich that I sort of admired was more like a Mike Gravel, an outsider. He was a maverick in senses that made sense to be a maverick on. Anti-war, surveillance state, police state, big brother sort of bullshit. The Bushite bullshit. Bush hasn't been in office in a long time, Dennis. Obama fucked up the country for 2 terms. Now we've got President Donald Trump. You're not going to be able to run on an, hey, I'm a progressive, I can stand up to Donald Trump platform. The neoliberals will destroy you. By the way, this race is a microcosm of the larger problem in the Democratic Party. Cordray is a neoliberal, of a fairly standard duties. He's on some major fiscal committee, I believe, actually. Some major economic committee. He's a career Democrat, a corporate politician. That's basically what he is. Dennis Kucinich, for all of the bad things about him, is the grassroots, progressive outsider. He is far left on actually some issues, which is what most neoliberals aren't. Like, name an issue in which Hillary Clinton was far left. Can you name one? No, you probably can't, because such issues don't exist. Here's the thing. Cordray will probably win. He'll probably get around 50-60% of the vote. Kucinich will be somewhere in the 20s or 30s or something. Kucinich will probably lose. He represents the slice of the Democratic Party that is energized. It's smaller, but it's actually energized. It's younger, it's more energetic, and it's actually on the left, which means it has very little at this point in common with DNC a la Tom Perez. The problem for the Democratic Party is that they're going to have to choose a boring neoliberal candidate come 2020. Don't you think that gives Trump a little bit of an advantage? He's going to bounce around and tweet and make memes and say off-the-wall shit and gobble up the news cycle, and they're not going to be able to avoid it. They know he's conning them. When he says off-the-wall things or purposely makes a spelling error, at this point, all of the media knows that he's conning them. But they can't wean themselves off of Trump's heroin. His tabloid heroin has poisoned the entire corporate press. And it's great to watch because, I mean, they were already tabloids anyway. It's just now they only have one subject to talk about. He's running them into the ground, and he's going to outpace them. He can do this for fucking ever. He's been doing it for 30 years. The Democrats have to choose whether they're going to have someone who's actually capable of gobbling up any of the news cycle, which would be a progressive, or a neoliberal who gets the corporate backing. The problem is most of the Democrats in the country still support neoliberalism. There are more Clintonian Democrats than Sanders progressives and socialists. I hate to tell this to the younger Democrats, but you're outnumbered significantly, about 2-1. You're not going to be able to get your progressive candidate. You're probably going to get Trump 2020. That's probably what you're going to see. At that point, maybe then the party loyal, the DNC-ites, will fall by the wayside. You can stomp them out of existence, wash them aside without too much trouble. My advice to the younger Democrats: go ahead, vote for the boring neoliberal. Don't try to ejaculate yet. You have to keep going. You have to keep thrusting if you want to get off at this point. You're going to have a little bit of a problem. If you get your progressive candidate, they probably won't win. They'll alienate the neoliberals. They'll be outraised and outspent 10-1, and Trump will have another advantage come 2020. Not that anyone's going to listen to my advice. I still get called like a white nationalist or whatever by people who have like Karl Marx banners on Twitter. So it's pretty funny. You don't need to listen to me. Just watch my predictions. See what happens. You might find yourself on election night. You might find yourself a little bit disappointed. That's about all. Peace out. Alright everyone, based on the things that I've been seeing literally over the last month, I'm saying that there's a fairly high degree of chance that Trump becomes a two-term president. Now, I'm sure this video will probably get shared to the people with Karl Marx avatars on Twitter, and they'll have a field day with it. Like when I said, literally over almost a year ago, when I said, oh yeah, Trump's doing just fine, he'll probably win a second term anyway. A lot of people thought it was a running joke, and they were sort of memeing about how it would never happen. But then again, these are the same people who swore up and down to me that Clinton would win in 2016, so I tend to discount their opinions. Looking forward to the midterms first and foremost. The odds of a blue wave are quickly diminishing. You're not hearing that spoken of quite as much anymore, are you? In the wake of Korea, it's become increasingly difficult for his opponents to really attack him. Here's the problem. The main problem for Trump's opponents is that they've tacked all of their hopes of defeating him on either the Mueller probe, which is beginning to break down, I think you'd have to admit, even if you don't like Trump. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas for the Trump team and a lot like Doomsday for the Democrats on that particular issue. But also the concept that Trump is simply, he's not normal. He's nuts. He's nuts, demented or something. But if you look at his haranguing on Korea, it doesn't look like that now, does it? It's beginning to break the one-dimensional structure of propaganda aimed against him. Using one-dimensionality works. It is a really, really great way to demoralize and destroy your opponent. You simply have to constantly and endlessly, and from multiple angles. You can't do this singularly usually. You have to have a coordinated effort. You have to defame and denounce, and you destroy them by rendering them into a villain. Once they become a villain, nobody can then effectively defend them against anything you happen to say, because then it makes them feel like they're defending a villain. Once a person's good aspects, though, which literally everybody has, even the most irredeemable, deplorable individuals, if you then have a situation where the public sees some good in him, on Korea, on taxes, whatever, he does something that's not off the wall, it breaks one-dimensionality, it completely destroys the propaganda. The problem is that they haven't laid the groundwork for any real backup strategy. It seems they put all their eggs in one basket, but I'm going to give you 5 reasons right now why I think Trump has a significantly higher than 50-50 chance of being reelected. Now, there are several asides here. Number 1, we still have to see what happens in the midterms. This is a totally unofficial prediction. Number 1, we have to see what happens in the midterms. Will there be a blue wave, or will the red wall hold? Will it be somewhere in the middle? Do the Republicans actually end up gaining some Senate seats? The likelihood looks higher and higher that they're going to gain quite a few. If they gain 4 or 5 Senate seats, what does that say about the strength of the Democratic Party? When their campaign boils down to Trump is an asshole, essentially. And it shows you won't be able to run against Trump. And then they'll make all sorts of arguments about how the structure of the races didn't favor them, and it wasn't their fault. It was just, you had strong Republican incumbents. We were defending 2-1, and that'll be technically true, but the public won't buy it. All they're going to hear is, hey, the Democrats need to do a lot of soul searching because we've only got another, year to prep before an active 2020 campaign. It's going to be a slaughter fest, and the Republicans are going to steamroll us out of existence at this rate if we don't fight back. That's what you're going to hear. But there are several other things. Number 1, you could have a recession. Number 2, we could enter a war. And number 3, health problems. Trump could have a stroke or something. Those 3 could deny him 2020. Barring those 3, I think he wins. Here are 5 reasons why. Number 1 is Korea. Quite literally, it's one of the keys to the White House as a major foreign policy success. Considering the generally pessimistic attitude of the entire public and certainly the media, plus even a lot of Republicans towards the Korean situation, that pretty much counts as a major foreign policy success. And you look at his approval polling, he was hovering around 41%. Not great, it's survivable, but it's not great. Now he's upwards of 44%. And this is in the aggregate. This is an aggregate of recent polls. I'm not talking about any single poll. When Rasmussen says he's got 52% approval, fuck Rasmussen. Rasmussen was great during the election. You can't listen to one single poll. But now it's beginning to look like he's in the mid-40s. What did I say prior, literally like a week or 2 ago? I said 45% approval is the sweet spot he needs to be at or above in order to really hold down the Democratic odds of a blue wave in the midterms. Now, this doesn't necessarily, do anything for 2020. His approval could be 20% by then because of a major scandal or some major national calamity. That's definitely true, but it could also go in the other direction. There's no reason to believe that it'll fall below that. That's probably his more realistic approval. A lot of people are making the same mistake that they made during the election. During the election, they said that Trump had a low ceiling. That is, that there was a fairly low level of approval he could ever possibly get, and this is why he loses the primaries. And then they took that argument, exported it to the general, and said, well, he can never have more than 40% of the public back him, so Hillary wins by default. That wasn't true. Now they're saying the same thing. Oh, he can never crack 45% or something. Usually they say he has a low ceiling. I think he has a high floor. I think that about a third of the public would follow him, march into graves for him at this point because of his particular charismatic persona. You say that that's horrible, tyrannical, and fascistic. I'm saying it's just the way he works. The way in which he structures what he says and does is simply charismatic. There is a portion of the U.S. public that probably will never be off the Trump train. Even if he were to get impeached and removed from office, if they found actual evidence of collusion or something, there would still be an element of the U.S. public who would assume it was a deep state coup anyway. I'm just telling you the truth here. I'm not saying I happen to believe this, but there are people that do. Politically active people that turn out at very, very high levels, it seems, which is another advantage he has. Number 2 is taxes and jobs. the new tax rates that are significantly lower. The Democrats briefly tried to make the argument that it was a bad idea. Oh wow, did it backfire and fucking explode in their faces? And they decided they don't talk about taxes much. Nancy Pelosi now says, "Oh yeah, we should have been aboard. It's not that bad." But looking forward in the future, you're going to have several tax seasons prior to 2020. In which people are going to pay substantially less. There won't be a mandate for those that are uninsured. Trust me, for me, that's a couple grand. That's great. Trust me, I'm very happy about Trump's tax plan. Several of the middle class brackets have gone down a few points. There are several other taxes and fees that no longer exist. People will save a very large amount of money. Also, he doubled the deduction. The people who are very poor, otherwise they might have to pay at least a little something. They're not going to pay anything. They get money back from the government. The doubling of the deduction means for someone, by the way, like me who's self-employed, I don't need to find thousands and thousands of dollars in justified expenses and tabulate 1,000 pieces of paper in order to get a lower tax threshold. I can just take the standard deduction now. Makes it a lot more simple too. It's going to be a lot faster. I'm not going to have to sit there for an hour and a half doing my taxes at the office like I did for this last season, and I'm going to end up paying probably a little bit less despite probably making somewhat more. So taxes and jobs, unemployment just fell below 4%. That's a critical threshold. That I would say that economically speaking, that's almost a key to the White House in and of itself, because it's something we haven't seen since the early 2000s. We're talking, you have to go back to the end of the Clinton era to find an economy that's performing like this. That is good. It's also something the Democrats can't really counter against. What are they going to say? What are they going to run on? The tax cuts are bad. We want to charge you more money. Oh, that would be a wonderful idea. By the way, the deficit, nobody cares about it anymore. It's going to be a permanent deficit at this point. I don't agree with that. I think it's still a problem and we need to tackle it more seriously. I want a huge amount of spending cuts to go along with additional tax cuts. This is what I would do. I'd give people a second round of tax cuts and then I'd say, fuck regulations. 90% of them won't exist anymore. We just won't enforce them. I think that'd be the best thing for our economy, but Trump is doing a good job on that, all things considered. His approval on jobs and taxes is well above 50%. Democrats can't do anything about that. Number 3, no new wars. Actually, he appears to be ending one. As far as Syria, we're drawing things down there. That's good. Unfortunately, I would say this. Unfortunately, the American public has come to the conclusion that killing people with drones is not an act of war. Neither are targeted airstrikes. Now, I disagree with that. I think that is still war. But the American public doesn't see it that way. They've been, through propaganda, primed by the deep state to think that unless there are tens of thousands of troops on the ground, it's not a real war. It's just a little bit of a dust-up. Don't worry about it. We're just fighting, people who took up arms in some desert. You don't need to, Ma and Pa America don't have to feel guilty about the fact that their tax money is killing civilians. But as long as Trump doesn't start an invasion, as long as he doesn't decide to invade Syria or go across the DMZ, or he's like, we're going to move into Venezuela, yeah, that's definitely a positive thing for him. The American public is tired of at least the overt side, I think, of war, because we've had so many of these problems for literally the last 20 fucking years. Number 3, this is a big one, and this is one you never hear mentioned. The DNC is controlled by inept neoliberals. The problem is that the younger Democratic voters, the energized voters that you want to knock on people's doors and post up posters, they're not really with it. The millennials are starting to abandon the Democrats, down 7 points from election time. Approval for the Democratic Party. It was above 50%. Now it's lower than Trump's approval rating overall. The millennials have gotten upset with the neoliberals. Now, if you have a progressive revolt, then this wouldn't be a point that would matter. But right now, Tom Perez is the head of the DNC. Okay, enough said. He's inept. He doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to counter Donald Trump. Look, the Democrats are almost at this point, they've got so much malaise as a party, they're barely even talking about anything anymore. When's the last time that the Democrats even did something newsworthy? Like Nancy Pelosi or Schumer do something. The last time it was when they were talking with Trump about his wall. Now he's threatening another shutdown. The Democrats don't want that. They know that they're going to get seated with it. Now, the Republicans don't really want it either, but things are starting to swing heavily against the Democrats with regards to economics. Trump will tie it into his message about jobs and taxes and say, look, the Democrats want to stymie this great economy we're building. that most people do feel positively about, including some Democrats and virtually all independent voters in the country. Do the Democrats really want to sit there and say, we're going to deny you a few $billions for comprehensive border defense? We're not even going to talk about it. We're going to sit on our asses and let you shut down the government instead. The average American is in support of the concept of guarding the border anyway. The Democrats have lost the immigration debate. While people were sleeping, they didn't notice that the Democrats went from early on having a really good moral position to now having none. Trump successfully outmaneuvered them time and time again. They've lost. They need to fund his wall. They don't have another choice, or they're going to suffer severe attrition in all of the races that are anywhere near the border. Or in any urban area, they're going to start to suffer significantly on the immigration issue. It's going to be a third thing. Trump can roll that up with foreign policy and taxes. He's got a winning re-election bid right there. He doesn't need anything else. Number 5 is the approval level. It's approaching or at around 45%. That's the level I think he needs to be at. Because what does the 45% generally represent? It represents the Republicans plus a fairly good proportion of independents. The thing is, I don't believe that in 2020 the Democrats are going to have a charismatic candidate who appeals much to several segments of the voting public that they need. Rust Belt Democrats, who they don't necessarily approve of Trump, but they're not going to vote for the Democrats as long as they're on a we will raise your taxes and fuck the middle class platform. So that's a weak spot for the Democrats. There's a chink in their armor. And the other one is the youth vote. Younger voters, Gen Z is not as liberal as the millennials. We're starting to gravitate away from liberalism towards, a centrist sort of feeling in the millennial generation. The millennials are realizing that the Democrats who controlled our young adulthood didn't do anything for us. They didn't make the jobs that we needed. They didn't do anything about student loans. They never fulfilled any of their promises, and we've still got a police state and some active combat going on overseas. If you were a pacifistic anti-war liberal like myself, a la the late Bush era, no, you probably didn't approve of Obama. Voted for him first term, within a couple of years, hated his guts, voted for Ron Paul in 2012. There are a lot of millennials that are in the millennial generation. 15% of us basically were Ron Paulites, libertarians, at least in name. No. I would say that Trump at this point has like a 90% chance of being reelected, assuming that nothing significantly changes. Looking at the economy and foreign policy, it's more likely to change in his favor, not against him. What are the Democrats going to do? If they don't get their blue wave, what are you supposed to do to stop him anyway? If you lose power in the Senate and he can ram through his appointees, which very well may be the case, he may get to the threshold where he doesn't need your permission to appoint anyone he wants. He can do anything he wants at that point. Yeah. Now you lose. You'll be a minor party at that point. Nobody's going to care what the Democrats do. You probably at this point have lost your chance to gain the Senate. That's almost certain at this point. Your odds of taking the Senate are minuscule. Your odds of losing power in the Senate are now higher than 50-50. You'll probably lose 2 or 3 seats, maybe a little bit more. That's a one win for the Republicans. It also allows Trump to tweet repeatedly about that after election night come the midterms. No, the Republicans, yeah, we lost House seats, but we've gained a bunch in the Senate. What happens if you don't really gain anything in the House? Gain like 3 seats or something. What's that going to say about you as a party? You've cast off the President of the United States as Hitler, as being an irredeemable bigot. He is a sexist, a racist, a horrible, warmongering, despicable, insane human being. And yet he's winning. What does that say about you as a party? The youth is going to abandon you lock, stock, and barrel. They'll probably get back on the Trump train just to punish you. If the Democratic Party chooses a neoliberal, the youth will abandon the Democrats. You'll have a GOP or a third-party youth. Gen Z will end up, never being part of the, hey, being liberal is cool, man, smoke weed every day sort of thing. Probably, by the way, the best thing for this country. Then you have to deal with a right-wing authoritarianism like we did during the early Bush administration, maybe. But we'll see what happens. We've got to put the millennials failed, we didn't reform things the way we should have, so now we have to hope Gen Z does. Or maybe, Generation Alpha comes after them, wait another 15, 20 years? Yeah, we'll see what happens. That's about all. Peace out.